Taking the Myth, your topical, skeptical discussion show. I'm Stephen Knight, and joining me to work through all the big topics is the one, the only, the Iram of Ramzan. Hello, Iram.
Howdy.
Howdy. How you doing?
I'm all right. How was your Eid? How was your Ramadan?
Fantastic. I don't think I could ever hitch my wagon to a religion that required you to fast. Of all the things to put yourself through as a human being, not having food for a certain set amount of time would be much more... Actually, to be honest, I could probably manage a Hajj, but easier than I could manage to fast.
I don't think you could because, as a heathen, you're not allowed into the holy city.
Is that right?
Yeah, so you could probably fast better than you could go on the Hajj, unless you convert. So,
I'll think about it. It's something to consider, isn't it? I mean, some people, I'm reaching midlife now. Some people get a big shiny red Porsche. Maybe I'll just convert to Islam.
Yeah, just chop off your doodah and convert.
But, if I do convert to Islam and say I don't want to be one of those Islamics anymore, kind of like if you buy something out the shop and you get the receipt and you get kind of like a no questions asked window to bring the product back, and that's fine. Islam's got the same sort of deal, yeah? You can just kind of renounce Islam and everyone's tickety-boo, no problems whatsoever, so I'm led to believe.
So have you been in the past 2 months? It's been a while.
I've been to Mexico. I've been all over the show, having a good time.
I've been to nowhere. I went to Oldham twice.
Oh, you poor thing. At least you can leave. That's the best thing about Oldham. They let you leave.
Hey, it's not too bad.
We saw each other a couple of months ago. We were both present and correct for the National Secular Society's Secularism Conference 2019. And it was... It was a doozy. I drank all the wine. You ate all the tiny burgers. It's good fun had by all.
They were tiny, to be fair. I mean, they were like the size of my thumb. You needed at least 15 of those.
You needed to strut around pretending you was a giant.
To be fair, that counted as my dinner. That's why I was just eating a lot of stuff. It was a very carb-heavy day.
Well, I got to meet Saif Al-Muluk, and I can't remember when you interviewed him. Did you interview him in person or over the phone? Is this the first time you've met him?
No. I met him once at the One Law for All Secular Conference in November, and then I met him a few days later for an interview, which was published in The Spectator and the Sunday Times as well. So yeah, I interviewed him in person. And then obviously met him again at the conference. Yeah,
a lovely chap. I'm very pleased to have met him in the flesh. I've interviewed him on the podcast as well. Won our Secularist of the Year award. Very courageous gentleman. Maybe you can fill the listeners in on who he is, what he's done, why he's so influential, why he deserves Secularist of the Year.
He's Pakistani and therefore worthy of an award just for that.
Just for that, yeah.
Just for that, yeah.
South Asian Secularist of the Year award.
So basically, Saif Al-Muluk was the lawyer for Asia Bibi, a poor, illiterate farm worker, and she was accused of blaspheming against the Prophet Muhammad, which she denied from day one. They claim that she confessed, but a lot of these confessions can be they can be under duress. So poor Asia Bibi, mother of several children as well, she's arrested then for blaspheming, found guilty, and then she was in jail for about almost a decade, languishing in jail for such a long time, until Saif Al-Muluk about 3 years ago decided to take up her case and get her out of prison basically. And he didn't stop until the Pakistani Supreme Court finally overturned the ruling and found her not guilty and said she was completely innocent. That should have been the end of the matter, but unfortunately she still had to stay in hiding because there were just violent religious mobs after her. These people just can't let people live and let live. They just have to have their pound of flesh. So they were just protesting for days non-stop, bringing several cities to a standstill because they just wanted her dead, for crying out loud. And then obviously Muluk's life was also in danger, so he was put on a plane and just told to get out of Pakistan. So he was in Europe, he's in the Netherlands, came to Britain for a short while, and then a few months later, he just went back, said, no, I have to go back because there's another couple. There's another woman in Pakistan who is being accused of blasphemy, because these things don't happen that often in Pakistan, you know. And he said it's his job to defend them, and he's hoping that they will be freed. And it looks like they will be, especially if he's on the case. So at the National Secular Society's conference in May, he was awarded Secularist of the Year, and he just got a standing ovation as well. You know, a lot of people were very awed by this, you know, seemingly ordinary man. You know, he doesn't go around with any airs and graces. He just gets on with it. Just said, I have to do it.
Lovely chap, and it's worth mentioning just how much courage it would take to do the kind of work he does. People who fight blasphemy cases in Pakistan don't do very well with the whole mortality thing. These, you know, hundreds of cases of retribution, vigilante violence, intimidation, coercion, all sorts of things, because someone wants to stand up for the right of a woman not to go to jail, or even she was facing execution, wasn't she? For bogus, trumped-up charges of blasphemy. I mean, I don't accept the concept of blasphemy anyway, but even in a country that has the blasphemy law, her charges seemed like they were dubious anyway, and they often find, because that blasphemy charge is on the books in Pakistan, people just invoke it and use it to settle petty tribal personal disputes as well. So it's a very dangerous situation to be in, to be accused of blasphemy. If you don't get, you know, killed in the streets, there's a good chance you'll get hauled in jail or worse. So he's a very brave man. The fact that he's done this once, you know, received some notoriety, I'm sure more people in Pakistan know who he is now, and he's going back to do it all again. I know I really do fear for his well-being, but you can't help but admire the courage of the man.
Absolutely. You know, it's also worth mentioning that he did invite us to stay in his house in Lahore. He's like, yeah, just stay. I'll show you around. And we're like, oh, okay.
TTM live from Lahore then. Do you fancy it?
Yeah. Oh my God. We could have like a view of the main big mosque over there, and we'd have like the call to prayer blaring in the background so that people
forget it.
Would know that we
changed my mind already. Fuck it.
Such an Islamophobe.
All right, so I'm pleased to see that he got that, and you've got to give the National Secular Society credit for their choice of secularists. They always seem to find the right person, the right mood, the right tone to strike with their award. I remember being there when they awarded it to Charlie Hebdo as well, and I think Majid Nawaz got it one year, didn't he? So yeah, it's good to see them supporting that kind of activism.
There were some very interesting speakers there. The counter-extremism czar Sarah Khan was there as well. She made a speech to talk about attitudes on extremism and challenging extremist views as well. Izzy Posen was there. I believe he's been on the podcast before.
Yes, and I think he was selected to speak at the National Secular Society because he'd been on my podcast, which makes me incredibly happy that someone who's got some.
Does that mean you have a lot of power?
I mean, I don't want to, stress this too much, but I am kind of a big deal now. Here I am. So, you refer to me as Sir Stephen Knight for the duration of this conversation. No, I mean, that's one of the great things about recording a conversation with somebody online. It's there and people can absorb it and hear it, and it gets passed around, and people who have got interesting stories and who are good speakers, they naturally, rise to the top. I got a lot of good feedback about the episode, so I'm happy that that's led to him speaking at the NSS. So yeah, great event. It might be worth picking up on something that's kind of still being discussed, but took a massive amount of attention and debate and discussion over the last few months, and that's the phenomenon of milkshaking, a very, very British form of political violence.
Is that the concept of bringing milkshakes, bringing boys to the yard via the
Exactly.
milkshakes?
I think the great philosopher Kelsey once remarked. No, so. We had political figures I think running for election, MEPs, the European elections, I think it started, if I'm not mistaken, with Tommy Robinson. He got a milkshake thrown in his face by a young Muslim chap in Bury, I think it may have been,
What flavour was it?
I can't remember. I was born in Bury. Bit of useless trivia for you there.
That explains all the violence.
What was interesting about this, Tommy Robinson was having a discussion with this guy. They were having a debate. It was a disagreement, but it was civil as far as I could see. This guy just launches a milkshake in his face, and then it kicks off. And what was interesting about that for me was how quick people were to celebrate it and play it down. Not just that, but almost encourage it. Now, I understand that getting milkshake on you isn't the worst thing that can happen to you on the scale of political violence, but I do think it's a slippery slope. And what we saw after everyone celebrated this and championed it and even rewarded this guy, people were offering him like free drinks for life. Businesses were offering him things, companies like Burger King were making sly little jokes about it, these big corporations. It seemed fine because it was Tommy Robinson and he's perceived to be far right. So anything goes. And then what did we see in Oldham a few weeks later when Tommy Robinson was there? It escalated to bricks, stones, and eggs and various other missiles. And then we saw Nigel Farage get a milkshake over him. We saw Carl Benjamin, aka Sargon of Akkad, get a milkshake over him. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on this whole phenomenon of milkshaking people and the response to it.
Well, I've seen several articles, mostly on liberal or left-wing websites, defending the use of milkshaking, saying it's about ridiculing far-right figures and how it's effective because they're such bogeyman figures, and if you milkshake them, it doesn't make them as scary anymore. It just makes them look ridiculous as they supposedly are. I mean, I don't know if that really is effective way. I mean, it doesn't really change people's perceptions of them. If anything, it just makes them defend those figures even more. And also, regardless of what you think of Nigel Farage, he's not far right at all. You could maybe describe him as a populist, but I would not describe Nigel Farage as far right. I'm probably gonna get booed by so many liberals by this, but I think sometimes these labels matter because everybody now that we don't like is far right. Just everyone's far right now. We're far right.
I mean, one of the things that really bothers me about it as well, it's not necessarily the celebration of it or the encouragement of it or the excuses for it. It's the selfishness of it as well. It's almost saying that I get to decide who gets to hear Nigel Farage speak or Tommy Robinson speak.
Also, what's annoying is the double standards, because if a milkshake had been thrown at Anna Soubry, for example, the former Conservative MP who then stood for Change UK or the Independent Party, whatever they're calling themselves, no one would be defending that. They'd be saying, oh, but, Joe Cox was murdered by a far-right nutter a few years ago. Is this what we want to see? This is the atmosphere we're creating. So if Anna Soubry had been milkshaked, nobody would be defending that. So I think there's a bit of double standards here. We wouldn't be defending people's right to throw stuff at Anna Soubry. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn, wasn't he egged a while ago as well? And I remember one of his Twitter champions, I'm not going to mention their name, but one of his Twitter champions wasn't happy about it and wanted to confront the egg thrower.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's okay to throw a milkshake at Nigel Farage, but don't throw eggs at his royal Corbynness, because that's wrong. I think this is really indicative of how nasty politics is now. I think a lot of people are just divided, they're polarized. Nobody wants to have a sensible debate. It's just everything is, I don't know, it's just so heightened now. You just can't have a sensible debate about anything anymore. Brexit has just taken over. We can't seem to do anything in Parliament now because Brexit has stalled everything.
It's become in certain circles, and they're usually the loudest circles, it's become very unsophisticated, the political debate. Everything's been filtered through this binary world view of good and evil. And in many people's minds, this is how crazy it's got. Someone like Nigel Farage is as dangerous and as evil as Adolf Hitler. That's the rhetoric and vitriol they use to regard him. That's how much of an evil force he is in some people's minds. And he's barely right of centre, really. He's just a national populist, an absolute clown in my own personal opinion, but he's not going to start rounding up the Jews anytime soon. And I think people just need to get a sense of proportion and engage in the issues. And when did it become controversial to say don't throw shit at people that you disagree with? I dislike. Let's look at it in a sliding scale of dangers, right? So what's more of a danger, or really in terms of ideology? Is it someone who's an Islamist, or somebody who wants to reduce immigration, which is Nigel Farage's view? I have some far stronger views against Islamists than I do against someone like Nigel Farage. I have far stronger views against Islamists than many people do about Nigel Farage, even the ones that hate him. I'm still not going to advocate violence against Islamists, even throwing anything. If somebody did that to Islamist street preachers or Anjem Chowdhury, my view would be, even as enjoyable as it would be to watch, even as funny as it would be to watch, my overarching point on this is it doesn't help. Whatever you're trying to achieve, if you're trying to change people's minds or expose these individuals, throwing a milkshake's going to do fuck all. It's going to create sympathy for them. It's going to put them in the newspapers. Everyone who already supported them is going to carry on supporting them. What are you trying to achieve? It's a narcissistic me generation where I've got to be on the video of milkshaking the politician. I've got to be celebrated. I've got to have my 10 minutes of fame for doing something ridiculously stupid. And I just wish people would, engage with the arguments. One of the things that really annoyed me during the Brexit debates with Nigel Farage, he'd make some points about immigration. He'd bring up stats. He'd make them, bring up points about NHS, housing, all sorts of things, even diseases at one point. Now, it could have all been bullshit. It absolutely could have been, right? But the opposition responded by going racist, xenophobe, fascist. So I'm thinking, you've not dealt with any of his arguments, even if he's wrong.
No, they play the man, not the
Yeah,
ball.
it's exactly it. So I don't know if I don't think it's possible, in fact, to have a more sensible approach to politics now, while social media is hanging over there like some big spectre of doom, just constantly, enforcing and reinforcing bad opinions all the time and rewarding people for behaving terribly.
Social media's really changed the game. And speaking of making things worse, like when Tommy Robinson was campaigning to be an MEP for the Northwest, he would have been your MEP, by the way.
Yeah, I know. That's scary, isn't it?
But he lost his deposit. So he went to Oldham, my hometown, and he ended up in the area of Limeside, or as we referred to it as crime side when we were kids, because it was that bad. Like, you just wouldn't go there because it was a nasty area. And if you were brown, you definitely wouldn't go near crime side because you'd just be lynched. And it's telling how he had to go into that area as well. But then what's worse is how he was met by the so-called Muslim Defence League, who just turned up with their faces covered, and then it just descended into this massive brawl. Like, what the hell? It didn't make anybody in Oldham look good. It made them look like idiots. I mean, not that some of them have to try very hard, but it just made the situation worse. I mean, I get it. Tommy Robinson is a very, very divisive figure. You don't like him, don't have to like him. But then why give him that level of attention in the first place? Just let him have his pathetic little march or campaign there, and just rest of you all just ignore him. Let the whole thing go down like a lead balloon. Why do something that's actually made you look worse?
So yeah, we can all just chill out, stop throwing shit and rewarding people for throwing shit, because it does.
And if anything, it's a waste of milkshake as well. I mean, you've just wasted a couple of quid, and then you've thrown it at somebody. And I think the guy who threw the milkshake at Farage, was he convicted for it as well?
He was, yeah. It was a very expensive milkshake. In fact, I'm going to bring up the facts on that. Won't be a second.
Do you think it should be classed as assault? It was classed as assault in court, wasn't it?
I think it is assault, and I think it only doesn't feel like assault because it's funny, hilarious assault. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you can't go about your day without having beverages thrown at you, I mean, and where do you draw the line? Is it a beverage being thrown? Is it the substance? What if it's piss? Does that make a difference? If it's a bodily fluid, does that make a difference? If it's hot, you know what I mean? And I think to have anything thrown at you in anger or against your consent is assault.
Yeah, but it's Farage, so, you know. It's
there we go. All bets are off. Okay, so according to the chief political correspondent and assistant editor at the Daily Telegraph, Christopher Hope, he tweeted out, Farage milkshake man Paul Crowther, 32, sentenced to a 12-month community order, plus 150 hours unpaid work, plus an £85 victim surcharge, plus £85 cost, plus £350 compensation to Nigel Farage. The compensation included the lapel microphone, which was £239, suit cleaning, and distress inconvenience. That is a fucking expensive milkshake.
Oh, whoa.
And I'm not going to say where he works, but somebody found his Facebook profile not long after this, found out which company he worked for, and then tried to get him to lose his job. So that's not the only thing now that you get publicly shamed, but people try and find out where you work and try and get you fired as well.
What do you think of that? Because like this has happened a lot where someone has done something publicly and then they'll find out where they work and then try and get them sacked. And sometimes those people do lose their jobs. Do you think those people should be sacked?
You know what it's like? You know when you're misbehaving in class but the teacher hasn't noticed and somebody puts their hand up and tells the teacher? It feels like that to me. Now, you may have been misbehaving, sure, but when some little fucker puts up their hand and tells the teacher on you, it just feels like poor sportsmanship. That to me is far more annoying, you know.
I think it depends on the job that they do as well. I mean, if he's just a checkout person at ASDA, I don't give a shit. But
well, I think he had some sort of customer service call centre role for quite a big media company. It is difficult because what the issue there is he's attacked somebody who's an influential public figure. This was all over the news. This was national news. So there's no escaping it. So when
he's got a criminal record now as well.
So when it hits that level,
I mean, should people be allowed to have a separate public life and a private life? You know, should what they do, like in this instance, milkshake someone, should it affect their job? Or what they say on social media, should that affect their job? Or does it depend on each job? Because some people, some companies have a very strict policy about this kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, that'll bring us on to a news story in a moment then. But to answer your question, I think it really depends on whether or not that thing you have done conflicts with your job. You know what it is here? So this guy throwing a milkshake over Nigel Farage is not in any way conflicted with his day job. He wasn't wearing a special uniform with the company's branding on or anything like that. He didn't do it in the name of that company. He wasn't a representative of that company on that day. As far as I'm aware, he wasn't supposed to be at work, which is another issue. So what it comes down to is a public issue thing. Can that company afford the negative attention brought to it by one of their employees doing something illegal and doing it very publicly against a well-known public figure who happens to be a politician? And I think all assault's bad, don't get me wrong, but I think there's a certain aspect of political assault that just makes it that little bit more serious when you're targeting public servants and politicians and things like that. So for me, I'm not bothered if this guy keeps his job or not. My gut instinct would be he's made a very silly mistake. He's been punished for it. He's got a hefty amount of fines to pay. It's probably not best to remove his income as well.
Yeah. Probably. I mean, he's probably not going to drink any more milkshakes anytime soon. Oh, God, I could do with a milkshake right now.
So I mean, that brings us on to a story that's just really been made public. First came to my attention in the Daily Mail. Luckily, it's now been reported in the Daily Mirror, so people can share it now and feel guilt-free and not have to give me grief about the fucking Daily Mail. I've had one tweet already about, the Daily Mail, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, just engage with the content of the article. You will not, you won't catch a disease. Daily Mail will not give you leprosy. That does sound like a Daily Mail headline, actually, doesn't it?
Ugh.
Foreign newspaper brings in leprosy epidemic.
Doesn't it?
So I'm going to read this headline from the Daily Mail. Disabled grandfather is sacked by ASDA after colleague complained about him sharing an anti-Islamic Billy Connolly sketch on his Facebook page. ASDA, for those who don't know, is probably our second biggest supermarket chain in the UK. It's actually owned by Walmart. I mean, the headline's already quite emotive. Disabled grandfather is sacked by ASDA after colleague complained. Now, there's quite a lot of juice on this story, Iram. And so I'll just read a little bit of it. Till worker Brian Leach, age 54, was let go by the supermarket after 7 colleagues complained that the comments in the skit were anti-Islamic. So he shared a Billy Connolly clip, and it's only a very short clip where he slags off basically all the religions at once. As a matter of fact, I may just play it.
That's it for me. Religion's fucking finished. That's it. It's fucking over, lads. It's fucking over. For a couple of thousand years, you've fucked it. It's over. It's fucking over. Take your Reformation, your Vatican, your fucking Mecca, and fuck off.
Was that Billy Connolly, or was that a Scotsman abroad?
Yeah, that's why he's not on the show anymore.
Actually fucking sounds like him. Has anyone seen Billy Connolly and a Scotsman abroad in the same room? I'm just saying.
Definitely not. Well, the actual fuller clip, at the end of the clip, he actually goes on, Billy Connolly, to say, suicide fucking bombing, now there's a bright idea. Every time there's a bang, the world is a wanker short. Fucking idiots.
He is a wanker because not only is he trying to kill himself, he wants to kill other fucking people as well. What's so controversial about that? He is a wanker. Other people would describe him as that. Other people, especially Muslims, are constantly saying these people are, they're not representative of Muslims or Islam, and they disagree with this person. So what's the controversy here?
Yeah. And I think it's very strange that the lead on this story is going with the anti-Islam aspect of it when he goes for Catholicism as well. He goes for Christianity.
He criticizes everything. So it must have been Muslim staff members who complained then.
Well, he did say this. He basically, after he posted this, he actually apologised for it and deleted it. But then he's gone on to say, I realised it was poor judgment, but it was a joke, and I didn't expect another colleague to post it to the entire Asian community. Now, by saying Asian in the UK, he's not talking about the Chinese. He means South Asians, Bangladeshi, probably Pakistani. He means Muslims, more or less. More overwhelmingly, that community in the UK polls as Muslim. Like, you're the exception to the rule if you're not. He goes on to say, they said 7 people, all Asian as I understand it, had complained, including the woman at head office who escalated the complaint. So they were all 7 Asian people, so probably 7 Muslims that led him to get fired. One of them posted it on Instagram along with a picture of the guy's face from...
What the hell?
So it's like an almost like digital fatwa in that sense.
But it's on his own Facebook page.
Yeah.
Why should it really matter? He's probably only got like 20 friends on there that he's shared it to.
There've been record numbers of arrests, police knocking on the door for social media comments, and there's people that people have made. These people already lost their jobs before for making social media comments, but now it seems that he's getting in trouble for posting a video of a comedian. Not just any comedian, not some guy doing a fucking stag night at the Frog and Bucket who's saying, yeah, I've got a good one about them Asians kind of thing. Billy Connolly, one of the most celebrated, respected and loved comedians in Britain.
Didn't he also pointed out ASDA sell Billy Connolly's materials? So
yes.
If it's that offensive, why are you selling it?
Now, I suppose that raises the question as well, because this guy had in his Facebook profile that he's a staff member at ASDA, they took that association as enough to get rid of him, basically. If you identify as an ASDA employee on your social media platforms and you say something that they find questionable or might bring the company into disrepute, they can get rid of you. So my advice to anyone listening who proudly emblazons the name of their company in their social media profiles, and you're also a very opinionated individual, or you've got I was going to say dark sense of humour, but I suppose if you've just got a sense of humour in this case, you might want to scrub all mention of your current occupation from your timelines if possible, because that's where we are now, isn't it? That's what social media has done to us all. We're all going to die on the sword of tweets that we sent 10 years ago, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, it's just absolutely ridiculous how much of an influence social media has on this kind of thing. It's like we saw with Roger Scruton as well. You know, it was just trial by social media and shoddy journalism. So my friend of mine said, you know, I think it's worth mentioning how censorship is going to be a massive issue. And I didn't take it seriously at first, but all these different examples that are coming up and the Twitter mob rulings, and it makes me think maybe, yeah, censorship really is a big thing for our age, even though we're in 2019, for heaven's sake.
Yeah, people need to expand their understanding of freedom of expression and censorship, especially in the age of digital media. And it's one of the things that I love about America as the First Amendment. But when you speak to an American about freedom of expression and censorship, unless the government's got direct involvement, they don't attempt to understand it as a free speech exercise. And I think people could do with reading a bit of John Stuart Mill, his wonderful book called On Liberty. I think that's still the strongest case for freedom of expression I've ever read, and he deals with the idea about the tyranny of the majority. So it's not necessarily about state oppression or the state censoring opinion or the chilling effect on free speech. It's the effect the majority has on you. It's the effect the mob has on you, you know. So it kind of makes the case that if you're an individual and you're the only individual on the planet to hold an opinion, that needs just as much protection as any opinion, if not more. So when he talks about the tyranny of the majority, I think you can make the comparison between that today and the Twitch mob, the online mobs that come for you if you say something that isn't correct. And you're right. If it's not, I mean, unfortunately, the police do come for you in this country if you say the wrong thing online now. But if it's not that, it's the mob get you, and they destroy your reputation. They can destroy your livelihood, careers, and everything. So we need to get to a more reasonable place with that, where it can just be ignored. It doesn't help that the media. I mean, it's kind of like
it's basically me.
It's you. The media.
Me now.
Yeah, but it's like a snake eating its tail in the sense, because some outrage occurs online, and it gives a little bit of a signal. And then the news media grab it and amplify that signal, and then the social media responds to that signal boost to increase the outrage on social media, and it just goes round and round and round and round. And I just think, I wish we could get journalism back to a place now where things that are online aren't really given much thought. You know, maybe you have to hear somebody speak to you in person before you go trying to trash their career.
It's really. I always find that really funny when we talk about outrage on social media or what politicians have said, and it seems like almost as though the press in that way is not allowing public figures to say something, because as soon as you do, you're just hounded for it. But then at the same time, this is the same media who didn't want to be regulated because we believe in free speech and freedom of the press, and you just think, so I bet you defend everything that appears, you know, in your own newspapers. So it's just utterly ridiculous what place we've come to now.
Well, Mr. Leach, who suffers from epilepsy, apparently that's his disability, after a car crash as a child, he says he's going to be appealing this decision. So I'm going to be keeping my eye on that, because that's nothing short of a massive supermarket chain enforcing blasphemy code on their employees, not only whilst they're working, presumably, but when they post things on their social media.
Sorry, does ASDA go around monitoring the social media accounts of some of its Muslim staff members? Because I'm pretty sure they've come out with stupid stuff as well. I bet some of them, not all, but I bet there's one or two who will have said something about, say, Israel, or said something that could be borderline anti-Semitic, or defending, say, imams who come out with regressive views. I mean, would they be telling them that they're out of a job next? No.
You know what this guy needed, don't you, to fight these 7 Asians with their complaints? Big fat dose of white privilege. It just went missing for him, didn't it? I don't know if he's not been paying his white fees, but he needs to get them up to date so that this kind of discrimination can stop. Yeah, so I'll be keeping an eye on that. I'm not happy with what ASDA's done there, but I mean, it's probably worth pointing out at this point that we are only getting one side of the story. ASDA have refused to comment on individual cases, so there may be more to it.
Oh, they always do that.
Yeah. I mean, everything this man said may be correct, and he may have been fired for precisely the reasons he stipulated, but we are only getting one side of the story, so I am mindful of that at the same time.
That's true. I mean, he could have been fired for being an utter lazy twat as well, so, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, this is true. Well, for something a bit more cheerful, I believe you've got some updates on the whole Anderton Park School controversy.
Yes. So we've mentioned this a few times on the podcast before. So there's a school in Birmingham, Anderton Park. It's a primary school. There's been protests out there non-stop because the head teacher's been incorporating materials in classrooms that seem to teach the equalities law, and that also means mentioning in this day and age that there are gay people. So you could have a family where there's 2 mummies or 2 daddies, and some people have taken that to mean, oh my god, our kids are being taught about bum sex, let's protest. So a lot of parents, mostly Muslims, have been protesting outside these schools in Birmingham. A Birmingham MP, Roger Godsiff, he's Labour, and he's actually supporting the protesters.
Is he sort of a conservative Christian, or is he just a wanker?
A bit of both. He's actually really annoyed his Labour colleagues by defending them because, Labour is synonymous with equality and opportunity and rights and defending gay people and defending Muslims. But, what happens when the two clash? So he said he's going to, there's video footage that showed him telling protesters, I'm going to continue to try and fight your corner because you're right. And that's what he said, you're right. So what happened was, it's because, in 2020, it'll be mandatory to teach sexual and relationship education, and it will be age appropriate as well. And it always is. Primary schools aren't going to be teaching children anything that's going to be not. Yeah,
they're not just going to slap on Brokeback Mountain and say, "Here you go, kids."
Yeah.
This is, but this is the kind of, there's a lot of misinformation and hyperbole coming out of these, so we say, Islamic propagandists. They're misrepresenting what they know outside his program is quite heavily, as far as I can tell.
So yeah, there's all these loudmouths who are going around with an agenda, telling parents that, this is what they're teaching at your school. Head teacher's been getting death threats. They're all telling her to stand down, and a lot of it is because during the whole Trojan horse scandal in 2014, 2015, when really hardline Muslims in Birmingham tried to enforce their agenda onto schools and the education, her school was one of the Trojan horse schools, actually, and they weren't successful in getting rid of her, and she thinks now that that's one of the reasons why her school is being targeted, because it's revenge, plain and simple. So Boris Johnson, who could be our next prime minister, he not so long ago, he actually spoke out about it and said, he defended the school, and said he doesn't agree with the idea of children being taken out of schools, because some of the children, there were at least, I think, 300 who were taken out of school last month because the parents disagreed with these lessons being taught, so they just didn't send their children in. And it's just, the whole thing has escalated, and the school finally I think the Birmingham City Council finally managed to put an injunction on them, so these parents can't protest exactly outside the school, there's a zone, I think a 1 to 2 mile radius where they can't protest, so they have to go onto other streets in order to come out with their hateful homophobic rants. And they are homophobic. They insist that they're not, because they come out with a classic, oh, you know, we have a gay couple who live 2 doors down, and, you know, we give them samosas on Eid. You know, we're not homophobic. You know, we're not homophobic because we just disagree with the act of homosexuality. We don't, you know, if you have feelings, that's different, but if you act upon them, that is the bit that is actually haram.
Such a cop out, isn't it? You can be gay, don't dare do anything gay.
Yeah, don't do anything gay. Just live in denial and just pray that.
Be gay, don't do gay.
And then there was a huge protest outside the school. I think it was just over a month ago, maybe. And what happened was there was this imam that had come all the way from Yorkshire, nothing to do with the school. It doesn't even have children at the school, and he was calling people paedophiles on YouTube. And the protesters weren't stopping him; they were letting him come out with libelous stuff like that. Slanderous stuff like that. He was saying that they're giving them paedophilic material, and he downloaded some images from the internet and said, "Oh, this is what they're showing your kids." They're not. That's not what they're showing your kids at all. And Nazir Afzal, the former, you know, chief prosecutor for the Northwest CPS, he was called in to mediate, and he wasn't successful, and said that, you know, there's just no progress being made because the leader of the protest, Shakil Afzal, doesn't even have children at the school, but he wants to be there negotiating, and he wants to be able to come into meetings. Well, sorry, that's not how it works at schools. You do not get to demand to be given an audience with the head teacher, especially if you're not even a parent. You have absolutely no right. And so what's happened is, because of this, other people around the country is you know, conservative, borderline Islamist activists are seeing what's happening in Birmingham, and they're kind of learning from it, and they're all writing to their own schools and asking them what they'll be teaching them. And I've seen some WhatsApp messages that they're in where they're asking schools what they're teaching, and it's something silly like, you know, your child, obviously in their own sex group, so it'll be girls taught together and their boys taught separately together. And it's things like puberty, what will be happening to your body, and you can opt out of those lessons. And you think, first of all, this has nothing to do with LGBT stuff or relationships or anything, but also, why do you want your 10-year-old or 11-year-old child not knowing what's happening to their body? It's a very, very confusing time for them. And a lot of the time, these children don't get that information at home. You know, school is then a way where children get information that's not biased, it's objective, and it's going to be taught in a very age-appropriate way. These children are not going to be taught about anything that they need to know at home. And these parents seem to want to keep them in this little bubble.
Well, since we last spoke about it, like you just mentioned, they have managed to get an exclusion zone enforced so that people can't harass teachers in and out of school and be right on the school grounds, because that is unacceptable. You have a right to congregate and raise your concerns and have a voice. You don't get to do it on school grounds. That's a line. We've still got to wait for updates to see where that goes. It might be worth talking on something that's caught my eye, and I think this is a really interesting conversation. It'd be good to get your opinion on this as well. There was a study that came out on adverts in the UK, commercials in the UK. And the study found, I quote, this is from the Times.co.uk, an analysis of 1,000 adverts broadcast in the UK last year found that some traditionally marginalised groups may now be overrepresented on television. So what we've seen in recent years is there's been this huge push for representation, trying to include more and more people from, quote-unquote ethnic minority backgrounds. And the surge in that and the success of that has actually led to people of ethnic minorities being overrepresented in our TV commercials. So this is only one aspect of media, TV commercials. And apparently a lot of people have, ethnic minorities especially, have actually voiced dissatisfaction at that now. They feel like they're being tokenized a little bit. Now, I suppose my question is to you, how important is representation to you in media? Say, for instance, movies. Does it need to be an even split? Does it only work one way? I don't think anyone's petitioning Bollywood to increase their white Mancunian contingent. Do you need to feel that your character, your traits, your background, your upbringing is represented on screen to enjoy it? Or do you go there for a bit of escapism, is it possible just to empathise with other people? And for like the 9th part of this long-winded question, do you have to be an ethnic minority to write as an ethnic minority in a novel, for instance? Could I write as a Mexican? Could I write from the first, the point of view of a Mexican character just being a white Englishman? What do you think?
I think that's the beauty of fiction, isn't it? Because the whole point of fiction is you're supposed to let your imagination run wild.
Yeah.
I mean, Adrian Mole, the Diary of Adrian Mole, was written by a woman.
Oh, that's just ruined my childhood.
Yeah, so that was written by Sue Townsend. So she,
yeah, I know,
very accurately portrayed the voice of a teenager in those diaries. I mean, is it okay for her to do that or not? So I think as long as you're not silencing other voices, then it should be okay. Because I think that's the point that other people have made, that there should be more space for writers of other backgrounds. And I think it was which writer was it now? Monica Ali, who wrote Brick Lane. She wrote that bestseller Brick Lane, and she was just saying how it's all about diversity, but then don't pigeonhole me at the same time. So I think, if you don't want to write about your background and who you are, does it really matter then where the writer is from if you're going to write about different things? And I guess the whole point should be about equal opportunities then. So people should have the opportunities to access services or be able to submit their writing to publishers and have the opportunity to be published. So I think it's about, as long as you're not, say, silencing other voices. I don't care who's written a book, as long as it's a good book, really.
Yeah.
And if you've written a book and you've managed to get in the mind of someone, do I expect people to look like me on TV? I don't know. I don't really fancy seeing myself on TV, to be quite honest with you. Other people might disagree, but I think it.
But I'm supposed to accept that sort of the straight white male. So if I'm looking at, so when I was younger, it didn't really, gender and race didn't matter to me in characters, and they still, like when I used to sort of play cops and robbers and things like that, I used to pretend that I was Lieutenant Ellen Ripley from Aliens, torching a queen alien with a imaginary flamethrower fashioned from sticks. Do you know what I mean? And it didn't matter to me that she was a woman. What mattered is that the character was amazing and that scenario was amazing, and I could enjoy it and empathise with the situation and think it was kind of cool to be that kind of hero character. And it didn't matter to me that she was a woman. I played video games where I play as a woman. And
if that had happened now, then some charity like Mermaids would try have your gender reassignment done.
But what's important for me in terms of characters and stories isn't representation. It's whether there's an emotional truth to that character, whether it can make me feel something at a human level, an emotion, depending on the scenario and depending on the trials and tribulations they're facing, depending on the other characters they interact with, things like that. And the things about whether or not it's a black person, a white person, a brown person, a transgender person, a disabled person, it all feels kind of trivial to me. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes I see it all the time where, say, if I'm reading a woman's magazine. So, for example, if on Snapchat, so you get these stories, and if I click on the Cosmo one, and they're talking about relationships or sex and tips and stuff like that, and I've noticed more often than not, it's a lot of the time they're very keen to get in, say, lesbian couples or say bisexual, even though they're a very tiny proportion of the community. They don't represent that many
people, and yet it's like they're very determined to be to tick the box when it comes to diversity and representation, and sometimes it feels very forced, and that's what I don't like when it's just forced like that.
Yes, so audiences know when it's cynical, don't they? They know when an agenda's being pushed, and I don't mean some like nebulous gay agenda conspiracy. I mean like a studio marketing agenda of we need to get the diversity, and we need to get the gay person, we need to get the black person. And and going back to what I was saying about emotional truth, because they're not focusing on character and story, they think they can sacrifice character and story for diversity, which then underserves the ethnic background or the gender or the sexuality they're trying to promote. And I don't understand the idea of positive representation either. Why we can't have a serial killing transgender person. Why? I think that'd be good. Imagine a transgender actor pulling a performance out the bag like the Joker from The Dark Knight or something. That's a murderous, psychotic clown. But Heath Ledger's celebrated for it because it's such a devilishly good performance and character. Are we to say that a transgender person could never do that because it's bad representation of trans people? I don't understand what the rules are, and I don't understand why anyone cares.
But people do this when, like, they talk about having gay people playing gay people on screen. You think, but that's ridiculous. What? Gay people play straight people on TV as well, don't they not? It's called acting.
Yeah.
So I don't agree with that. So as for whether we want people to look like ourselves, I think this is a bit of a tricky one, because you do watch movies or buy magazines because you want to look at the glamour. You don't necessarily want someone who's going to look ordinary, but at the same time, I can understand why, if you're very young and impressionable, what kind of impact these things have on you. When you're a bit older, it doesn't matter to you as much. But it's like a couple of weeks ago, there was this big sensation around the Miss India contest because nearly all the contestants looked exactly the same. They were all tall, slim, fair-skinned, even though they live in India.
Copy and paste.
They all had an identical haircut. And everyone was saying they just don't look like your average Indian woman. And they're saying, should there be some more diversity in this? Don't we want people to look a bit different as well? And then I think, well, would I necessarily watch Indian movies because I wanted the actors to look like ordinary Indian men? And some of them actually really did. They're not good looking. But do you really want them to look like the average man on the street? Because, sorry, a lot of them are not good looking. It's true.
I'm just going to say it. And it's something we all know is true, but nobody really says. So if you're talking about...
I'm hot.
There's that, on one hand, Iram's hot. But when people... The word diversity means diverse, more mixed. Not just one thing, not just a mono thing, right? Whenever diversity is invoked in popular culture now, it just means less white people, please. Can we have fewer white people? That's what diversity means.
Yeah, it also means... especially when we have diversity in the media. So people say, "Oh, journalists, we don't have any say. We need more, say, Asian journalists." But
do we though?
We don't talk about the diversity of thought as well, because everyone's going to be mostly liberal. Everyone's going to be slightly left wing. They're not going to think that differently. There is a bit of groupthink involved. So they talk about diversity only in they only want to play lip service to diversity. Oh, you're Asian. Oh, you have brown skin. Tick, tick. Okay, that's diversity done. But what about their views? Are they diverse? Do they, are they going against the grain of some of their colleagues? Are they maybe centre-right instead of being centre-left?
I don't really have anything because I'm straight and I'm white and I'm male. So I'm scum, basically. I suppose the only thing I could cling on to is that I'm working class. But if I was to find out that I was given an opportunity because I'm working class, some publication needed to detoff its hierarchy and bring in, one of the common folk, I'd feel bad about that. I'd want to be considered based on my merits and my capabilities and my talents or lack
I mean,
thereof.
we say that, but sometimes it doesn't work like that. You know, a lot of the times you get to where you are because of who you are, because of who you're connected to. Sometimes it's not always about how talented you are. So I can see why there would be some sort of quota or schemes to get more people in, but I just wonder.
Yeah, I understand the nepotism side of it. I understand the privilege of wealth, but I wouldn't like to be just brought in solely because of my skin colour, my working class background, and that's
absolutely. But isn't it different in America? Because, you know, a lot of, say, BME actors here, when they go to America, they do much better, and they're not pigeonholed with their roles. They're not a token black person or a token Middle Eastern looking person. They tend to do better in their career.
The argument just seems like there seems to be no cut-off point for diversity. Someone's not telling me what the correct quota is. It just appears to be no white people, if possible, please. That's what diversity seems to mean in the mainstream now.
Exactly. Hashtag no white people.
Bang on the head in terms of diversity of thought, though. Nobody wants to increase the number of conservatives or right-wingers in any institution or media outlet. As a matter of fact, are there any prominent Hollywood actors who openly admit to voting Donald Trump? I think it's Tim Allen.
No, I actually as well. Kelsey Grammer admitted he voted Trump.
What? Sideshow Bob voted for Donald Trump.
Frasier voted Donald Trump. Yeah, I spit on Frasier now.
Yeah, but I mean, so that's rare though, isn't it? So I mean,
when they do speak out, they're vilified for it.
Yeah, so there's two things going on there. They're either overwhelmingly left-leaning liberal Democrats, or the ones that did vote for Trump just think it's not worth talking about it.
It's not worth the hassle.
That's a terrible situation because he's in charge. He won the election, so there's more people. He's
probably going to win the next one.
Yeah, and if it's become taboo in mainstream circles to say you voted for the current president of the United States, the lefty liberals need to realise there's something going on there, and it's probably their fault if they've created this climate where it's game over to put your hand up and say, I voted for the current president. I don't think it's going to get any better. I'm pretty sure he's in for a second term. What do you reckon?
Yeah, definitely. If he doesn't win, I'd be surprised. I mean, who are the Democrats putting forward? They had Hillary Clinton, and that was a massive disaster, really.
Bernie.
Well, everyone keeps saying, oh, well, she won the popular vote, so it could have been blah, blah, blah. No.
Well, that brings on to something that's worth talking about. Donald Trump, President of the United States, our closest ally. A man I really don't like, Iram, but I don't want to bang on about it because it's too easy. He actually visited the UK, an official state visit to the U of K. We rolled out the red carpet for him. He met the Queen. However, there was quite a lot of, shall we say, dissent. Some of it from very prominent members of our government. And I just wondered how you feel about this animosity towards our most important ally, the President of the United States, coming to the UK and getting quite a hostile reception from people who should probably be a bit more, what's the word?
Grown up?
Diplomatic, I think I was going for, but grown up works better. Yeah, so what's your views on this?
It's a very tricky one because if you don't like someone, should you make that known or not? But then if you're in politics, you have to do politics, which means, you know, you shouldn't do just what you want. You have to do something in line with your work as well. So I think it's better to get around the table with that person rather than just objecting to them being here. He's also our closest ally. He's not going anywhere, not anytime soon. He was here for the D-Day memorial service. He was here for the D-Day anniversary, wasn't he? So, and America was a massive ally in the Second World War. Britain needed America, so that's why he was invited here. He wasn't invited here just because, you know, the Queen got really bored and thought, you know what, I've not seen Donald for a while.
Yeah, see what Donnie's up to.
Let's see what he's up to. He can give me some tips on hair care. You know, he was here for a specific reason. So,
is it not wise to play? I mean, why don't they play the game? The politics is a game.
That's what I'm saying.
that you need to.
It is.
And
But it's easy for armchair pundits to say, "Oh, he shouldn't be doing this. He shouldn't be doing that." Well, that's why you're not in politics, and unfortunately, that's what you have to do in politics. We may not like it. We may not want to do it ourselves, but these people, they have to know how to deal with such people. It's pretty obvious that a lot of people in the government don't like this particular individual, but they know they have to deal with him, and it's better to be able to speak to him and see if you can get through to him, which I probably doubt they will, because this is Trump. But what else can you do?
It's okay not to like him on a personal level, fine, but why aren't you thinking of Great Britain? Why aren't you thinking of how this relationship can benefit us, especially in the context of post-Brexit, when we finally come out and we're looking for trade deals and we're looking to solidify relationships with the United States to kind of offset any issues that may arise from coming out of the EU. Is it really a good idea for the mayor of fucking London to overstep his remit and boycott the visit of Donald Trump, our closest ally and leader of the free world? I just thought it was really petty, and I think it felt like Sadiq Khan just forgetting his place a little bit. It's like, do you want to just crack on and consider the knife crime and acid attacks going on your watch at the minute, mate, and stop virtue signalling about the President of the United States? And then we have this situation now because Donald Trump's an incredibly thin-skinned, petty idiot, started going for Sadiq Khan on Twitter. And then Donald Trump's retweeting Katie Hopkins on Twitter. The President of the United States is retweeting Katie Hopkins.
She is vile.
Yeah, and I saw that and I thought, can we unplug the planet? Can we reset?
Can we ban these people from Twitter?
Yeah.
I'm all for free speech, but just ban them.
So grow up. I just do not understand. And it's really annoying as well that Jeremy Corbyn will meet with everybody under the sun, from Hezbollah to Hamas.
Yeah, Hezbollah, Hamas.
The IRA.
You know what's funny? I've noticed a lot of people and not just Corbyn, but there are other people in other various positions in public life who will say, well, sometimes you have to work people. I don't agree with everything they say, but you have to meet with these people. And yet when it comes to, say, Trump, they're like, oh no, we can't meet with him, we have to show our objection. And you think, so you're happy to work with people who have a very nasty reputation because quote unquote, this is how we achieve peace and friendship, and yet you don't apply that same reasoning to the leader of our most powerful, to one of the most powerful countries in the world, which is our number one ally.
And it's a democratically elected head of state. It's not some goddamn crackpot dictatorship who's just oppressing his people. I can understand giving that individual a bit of side eye when they visited, but it's the President of the United States. It's just really petty, and they need to think about the bigger picture. It's just become incredibly clear to me since I became an adult just how unequipped politicians are in terms of character and intelligence to deal with the issues of the day and sort things out that the actual people want them to do. And that's why they keep getting blindsided by the election of Trump, or people voting leave in the election.
They've just not learned. It's like with the whole Brexit thing. They just keep making the same mistakes. They want, there's the Conservative Party is trying to choose its next leader who will, then go on to be our next prime minister, and they're torn between someone who will be very pro-Brexit as opposed to very pro-Remain, who wants to stay as close to the EU as possible. And I can see their reasoning for it, but at the same time, I'm thinking, this is exactly why Theresa May is going to be out of a job, and it's exactly why I say people voted, you don't understand still to this day how we got to be in a position where we voted Brexit and Americans voted for Trump. They just don't want to understand that, and they just think it's easier, I guess, for them to pour scorn on such ideals or such people rather than understanding why something is happening. It's just, I guess, easier for them to do that rather than understanding it all.
Yeah, it's complicated and they want easy answers. Do you think it's worth jumping on a different topic, or do you want to see if we've got any questions from the Twitters?
I think I'd really like to mention the Jihadi Jack thing.
Oh,
Definitely.
okay. Yeah, so one of Britain's greatest exports seems to be jihadi fighters, these committed Muslims who go out to join the caliphate and have some really distinct British accent. It's very disturbing, and it's kind of one of the things now, like
British values, innit?
British values in it, and it's when people try and dismiss radical fundamentalism as some sort of foreign issue, and it's not. It's homegrown. It's as British as fish and chips now, unfortunately, Islamism. So we need to deal with it. But it's another one of them. He's somebody he's actually a convert. Oh, apologies, revert to the Islamic faith.
Thank you.
He's headed
some
out
posh
there.
white guy from
Some
Oxford,
posh white dude,
basically.
yeah. I don't understand who sees that on the news and thinks that's the place for me. It's a cross. It's a toss up between Centre Parks or the Caliphate this year. What do you think? Although Centre Parks is pretty expensive.
This Jihadi Jack, as he's been called, I really hate.
Not to be confused with
nicknames.
Jihadi John Mohammed Mwazi. These are British ISIS fighters that were given sort of vaguely Beatle-esque names. Why is he Jihadi Jack, though? I don't remember Jack being in the Beatles.
No, I don't think he's one of the Beatles, because he wasn't involved in the execution stuff. So the ones who were involved in the execution stuff, they were called the Beatles.
Right.
Yeah, this is just a nickname people have given him because the press love that kind of shit. So anyway, this Jihadi Jack, he left his Oxford home. How long ago now? I'm not sure. He left because he went to Syria, didn't really tell his family. His parents, Sally Lane and John Letts, last week they were given a 15-month suspended sentence each after sending about £223 to Jack. I mean, there was no suggestion that the money they were sent, like, that those who sent money had any sympathy for terrorism, but it's still an offence to do that.
They had warnings as well, I think, before.
They had repeated warnings that their son may have joined ISIS in Syria. So they're told about 3 times not to send money. They tried to wire him more than £1,700, but then they were, convicted at the Old Bailey of one terror account, but then given a suspended sentence. They just claimed that they wanted to help get their son out of danger in this war-torn country. But the prosecutors were saying that they basically turned a blind eye. They were a lot of people are suggesting that they're naive, but they were saying that actually they had many, many warnings that the cash that they would send him could inadvertently fund terrorism, and that's a crime under the Terrorism Act. So they, made a statement saying just, they still care about their son, they want him home, and he wants to come home because all he did with the money was probably just buy a few falafels.
Yeah, that's what he said, isn't it?
Because I didn't realise falafels would cost about £100 or so, but there you go. But a lot of people are saying that this is there's double standards to this, because Salim Wakil from Hampshire was jailed for 2.5 years in February because he sent $3,000 to his sister who joined ISIS. She got in touch with him and he didn't believe her at first. He was saying, no, I'm not doing anything to help you, blah, blah, blah. You've done this, you've done that. She kept messaging saying, she was very, very good at manipulating him, saying, look, I made a mistake, I want to come home. This is going to happen to me if you don't. And there's been suggestion that this is just this is double standards and it reeks of racism. Why is it that this white middle class family just got away with a suspended sentence, and everyone's saying, oh, they were just naive, they're trying to help their son, any parent would do the same? And yeah, any parent would do the same. I was speaking to an acquaintance of mine who said, I am a parent and I would, you just would do it. You'd do anything to get your child back, no matter what they've done. It's just what parents do. And I totally get that. But at the same time, what they did was fucking crime. And yet this Haitian man who seemed to think that he was helping his sister, even though he hated what she had done, he's given actual jail sentence for it. So I don't know whether it actually is, but it really does stink of racism. It does seem racist. It's one rule for one couple, another for somebody else.
I'll have to dig into that. Maybe it's got to do with the monetary value as well. Maybe it's a harsher sentence for the more money you send. I'm not sure how that'd work, but
maybe. But they both did exactly the same thing, and they were repeatedly warned about it. It's not like they didn't know. I don't know if he knew what she was doing exactly. Nobody might have told him, look, what you're doing is wrong, don't do it. Whereas with this couple, they were told on so many occasions, this is what's happening. They, I guess, maybe in both cases, they both ignored the warnings, but why is it that they're getting a more lenient sentence? So again, it could be to do with the monetary value, but I just think it really does come across as being racist in that way. It comes across as being unfair. And it's the same, I guess, with Shamima Bagram, blah, blah, Spaghetti Bolognese, whatever her name is. She had her citizenship revoked, and everyone's saying, well, what about, is it Jihadi Jack who might have Canadian citizenship, or is it somebody else? They're saying there's somebody who went off to join ISIS who could have citizenship from a different country. Will his citizenship be revoked? And he, Jihadi Jack was interviewed, I think he was interviewed by Sky. He was going on about how, shock horror, he wants to come back now that ISIS has been fucking, smashed to bits. And you want to come back now, do you? What a surprise. He's obviously defended his parents, saying, don't give up, you did the right thing, blah, 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 blah. My parents should have been punished. They didn't do anything. And what's funny was he said, I'm surprised they were convicted. They are definitely not Islamic fundamentalists. They're not even Muslim.
He said they were atheists, didn't he?
What the hell? So hang on a minute. So you can only be extreme if you're a Muslim or something. But he said, he'd love to go home, but he had, quote unquote, no intention of blowing British people up. That's all right then.
I'm convinced.
I believe him.
Yeah, in you come, my friend.
I think him and Spaghetti Bagram should get together, and I think they'd be a good couple, poster couple for reform after the Islamic State. What do you think?
That's definitely the way forward. Get Quilliam on the phone. But if you've paid attention this long in the podcast, you've learned 2 vital life lessons. Rule number 1, don't put the name of your employer on your social media profiles. Lesson number 2, don't give money to the Islamic State. So this podcast, if it's nothing else, at least it's informative. Iram, it's been a pleasure as always. Catch you next time. Thank you for listening to the Godless Spell Checker podcast. The podcast is a one-man operation produced in my spare time away from my day job, and I love making it for you. If you enjoy what you hear, please consider lending some support. The show is entirely listener supported. I don't sell anything, I don't run ads, and given the alternative and unpopular focus of my content, it's very unlikely to find a sponsor. So there are a number of ways you can support and chip in and help improve the show and give me more time to produce more content. You can become a patron supporter and pledge a monetary amount per month or per episode by visiting patreon.com/gspellchecker. If you can't lend monetary support right now, don't worry, there's other ways you can help the podcast too. You can share it on your various social media networks, or take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen to it. Your support is massively appreciated. Thank you. Think we've all learned something here today?